Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And today, this is going to be a special episode focused on the matter of voting. Usually we look at a particular person, place, or event and the history surrounding that. Today, though, since this is election week, November 2022, I think election day is this coming Tuesday. We thought we would take an episode and just simply talk about, I guess, Chris, the importance of voting and the importance of elections.
Yeah, and the reason I think it's important we talk about this topic in 2022 is because this is what's considered an off year when it comes to elections. Everybody always pays attention when it's a presidential election. There's all the media coverage. There's a lot. It's all driven, as far as pay attention. But then there's these things called midterm elections. This, I guess you would say, the off season of elections. And many people might not give it as much consideration. But Ray, I think in the political climate that we're in today's society, that anytime there are elections, whether it's at the federal, the state, or the local level, we need to pay attention to them. And not only do we need to pay attention to them, but we must understand what our civic responsibility is, not just every 4 years at a presidential election, but every year when it comes time in November to vote.
Yeah, sometimes these off-season elections, whether it's the midterms every 2 years or the odd a local election or whatever, sometimes the results of these elections, many times the results of these elections can have just as much, if not more, impact on your daily life. You think about it. Who's going to have a bigger impact on your Monday through Sunday than your mayor, your county commissioner, your sheriff, your chief of police, whatever the case may be? They're probably going to have a more daily impact on your life than the president of the United States is going to. So even though with these off-season elections, we often see lower turnout numbers, so I'm not sure that's going to be the case this year. These are very, very important elections. And unfortunately, like you sort of said there, Chris, they often get neglected.
Yeah, and so this week this week we have the local elections, depending on where people are listening. They're candidates running for a board of education or for a town commissioner, or it might even be a governor or state legislatures. But in the federal government, this is a very important election. People are still going back to 2020 and the presidential election and all that took place during them. And so now this is 2022. And so, Ray, I see it as it's going to be an opportunity for people who are into looking at things. This is a good checkpoint, right? To kind of see how the country feels about where we are after, where we were in 2020. If you see a major change where, it's the Democrats that are in power right now. So if you see a big change where Republicans win a lot, then that is basically a sign that people are unhappy about the direction the country is going. If you see where the same party is still in power after Tuesday, that kind of shows you that, yeah, there's some disgruntled people out there, but overall, the majority of people are kind of happy with the way that things are going. Maybe not happy, but they're accepting of kind of where we are. And I think that this is important because if you look at the federal level, members of the House are elected for 2-year terms, which means that all 435 seats of the House are decided during the midterm elections. Senators are elected to staggered 6-year terms. And so you basically have a third of the 100 seats that are up for election in the midterm election. Why is that important? Because it is so close to where you could see, Ray, Democrats are leading in the House right now, and they lead the Senate. They have 50-50 in the Senate, but the vice president is Democrat, so they have the advantage. So, Ray, this is so important because if these races are so close, you could see the legislative chambers of the federal government switch dramatically with having 2 Republicans now overseeing House and Senate, where it was 2 Democrats, or it could be a balance, 1 and 1. So I think that's why we really need to pay attention to how all of this is going to work, where maybe 10 years ago during a midterm, people really wouldn't have paid much attention.
Yeah, it is very close. It's hard to sort of predict the tea leaves, and I sort of deal in the world of history, so I don't try to get into looking at the future. But one sort of expects in these midterm elections, and I think my personal opinion is this is going to happen again this week, is that during midterm elections, the president's party sometimes loses, and sometimes loses pretty big. And it's interesting to me because we have a two-party system in this country, and if pretty much, with some exceptions with third parties or the era of good feelings, we've pretty much had a two-party system throughout the history of the country. So basically what that means is the Republicans get in power, people get mad at them, so we switch to the Democrats. They get in power, people get mad at them, so what do? We switch right back to the Republican Party. So it's sort of like there's a ping pong game going on between these two political parties, and one side's going to win, and then the next time the other side's going to win. But I think you're right. I think this really depends on how are people viewing things right now. How are people viewing foreign policy? How are people viewing, the COVID situation? But I think, Chris, this time around, I'm going back to James Carville in the 1992 presidential election. It's the economy, stupid. I think that's where we're going to be come the end of the day on Tuesday. The economy is going to be the issue that's going to drive this midterm election forward, I believe.
Yeah. And I think, once again, people look at that and you hear all of these, think about, the checks that were received, stimulus, and you think about, COVID relief money and all of these monies that have been trying to drive things back to normalcy or pre-COVID days, if you will. But it really doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican when you go to the gasoline station and you want to put gas in your car and you see that, 4 years ago, regardless of who's in charge, but 4 years ago, gas was one thing. Now it's another thing. Or when you go to the grocery store and you have a hard time finding milk, or you're struggling to be able to find, baby formula. That was a big crisis that was just recent. When you start, all of those things start to matter. And then people start looking and it's like, okay, I'm not, let's just use the climate that we're in. This is not our political beliefs, but let's just look at the climate that we're in. People are going to start saying, okay, I'm tired of paying over $3 and some odd cent a gallon. I'm tired of paying $10 for a Happy Meal. Who's in charge? Okay, that person's in charge. I don't want them in charge anymore. Bring somebody else in. I don't care who it is, but I'm not going to support that person or that party. And that goes all the way down to the local level. Because you have, take for instance, Board of Education members, or the local level really doesn't go on the agenda of Republican or Democrat, but it does go onto the agenda of Republican or Democrat. Even if you don't claim to be of any party, if they don't like the way the situation is, they're going to vote you out, regardless of how good of a job you've done or whatever the case might be. If people don't like, as you mentioned, the economy, or they don't like, the struggles that their children are facing, or whatever it is, people will say, next man up, next woman up, let's move on. I've got to put somebody else in power. And sometimes, as you mentioned, well, history does show that it is that ping pong effect. And that's just something that is historical and not just a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. And, sometimes I wonder if we would be better if we had a 4-party system or a 3-party system. I don't know how that would ever really work. And of course, you do have third parties throughout American history that have, sometimes changed the course of history. I think of the Progressive Party in 1912. I think of Ross Perot in 1992, and maybe to some degree the Green Party and Ralph Nader and all that in Florida in 2000. So sometimes these third parties, sometimes these sort of smaller groups can change the course of presidential history. But you're absolutely right, Chris. What's going on the ground a lot of times is going to determine how people vote and which side wins. And there's only two sides for the most part. Democrat or Republican, which side's going to win depends on which side's in power and how unhappy people are with the side that's in power.
And here's another thing where I think midterm elections are even more important than in a presidential election. It's this thing called voter apathy, that people just simply don't go vote. I mean, you don't have the clash between Biden and Trump. That's not on the ticket. Nobody's talking about that. They're talking about individuals they might not be aware of. They're talking about, Congress, and in people's minds, it's just, it doesn't matter. I'm not interested. I don't want to go out and vote. I don't have the time to vote. I don't make the effort to vote. And voter apathy is huge during midterm elections. People just don't go vote. And what happens with that is you just mentioned, it can overturn an election. It can really change things. And it's just because people didn't get out to vote. And that's why, Ray, I thought, for us to talk about this podcast is so important because, as the historians, one of the things that we're going to tell people to do is go vote. That is your civic duty. If you are a citizen of this country, you have rights, you have responsibilities, you have duties, and you must exercise that right to go and vote, to make a difference. Because, Ray, I'll just be honest. I've heard people, complain about somebody in charge, or they're talking about, a particular thing that happened. And then, I'll ask them the question, well, did you go vote? And it's like, no, I didn't take the time to go vote. I don't know if you really deserve the right to have a comment if you didn't take the time to go make a difference at the voting booth, if you did not go and vote, because voting shows that you're invested. Not voting means you don't care. And I think that's a huge problem, especially during midterm elections. I don't know if it'll be as much of a problem this time just because of the vitriol that's out there as far as politics, but it is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, voter apathy. And I sometimes wonder if voter apathy is connected to ease of voting. That is, how easy is it to vote? One thing that I think sort of helps us nowadays is early voting. And I know this time they had Saturday voting, and I believe in our area they even had some polling places open on Sunday. So certainly those type of things do help, where it's easier to vote. Maybe you vote from home, vote after work on a Wednesday, 2 weeks before the major election day. I think that ease of voting, making voting more easy, more flexible for people. I think that is something that maybe can help with voter apathy a little bit. But Chris, it's not the sole answer, because we still see it, right? We still see a lot of Americans who don't vote. I haven't done the research on this. I probably should have before we started this episode, but we've got 331 approximate million people as citizens of the United States right now, approximately 331 million. How many of those people vote? I mean, it's when I look at the presidential election of 2020, which I do happen to have the numbers on that, it was less than 160 million Americans voted. So voter apathy is a problem, not just simply in off years, which it's a major problem there, especially in what we could call off years or off elections. But it's even a problem in those years when you have a like 2020, where you had a highly contested presidential election, and less than 160 million Americans vote. So we still have a major problem in this country with voter apathy. Of course, I think one solution to that, Chris, is probably making it easier and easier to vote. But at the same time, why do you think, you mentioned if you don't vote, you can't argue about it, you can't complain if you don't take the time to vote? A good question, though, Chris, and I'm not expecting you to have the complete answer, is, well, why don't people vote? I mean, if we're doing early voting, you can vote by mail. I mean, we're doing everything but, bringing it to your kitchen table, putting it there, waiting for you to fill it out and taking it away. I mean, we're doing everything possible to get people to vote and to make it easy for people to vote. Why do you think there's a good population or segment of the population that still are not voting? What do you think is driving that?
I think there's two reasons. I think the first one is this lack of trust. Society today is based on disinformation instead of information. get on TikTok, Instagram, social media, Facebook, whatever, and there's these individuals who are showing these conspiracy theories. It's on both sides. It's everybody. They talk about harvesting ballots, where there's these fake ballots that start ballots never making it to the actual voting center, that there's fraud, dead people voting. You've got, people voting twice. So there's a lot of people who just don't trust the electoral system, and they don't understand the electoral system. And, so I think that has something to do with it, because once again, what do we like when it comes to news? We don't like the good stuff. We like the bad stuff. We like the nasty stuff. So even before the midterms this week, there's already talk of people who are going to appeal certain election results. They're already talking about appealing. They're already talking about fighting in court. And so people don't trust the system. And so they're like, why am I going to go vote when my vote doesn't matter? Because something's going to happen. Something squirrely is going to take place. And I just don't want to be a part of it. I think that's one. The second thing is, right, I think the reason for voter apathy is because of all of the negativity that comes with politics these days. You and I can't turn on the TV, listen to the radio, or even go online without seeing not just a political ad, but a negative political ad. People do not create political ads that talk about what they can do and what they will do and the type of person they are. Rather, they get on and they promote 30-second ads that destroy the other person's character. They destroy, the other person's ability to lead. I remember one, I can't remember if we talked about this off air or something, but there was a recent debate between two individuals. And one of the moderators asked the question and said, say something nice about the guy you're running against. And the guy had nothing.
Yeah.
He didn't come up with nothing. He proceeded to, talk about something negative. And I think people are tired of drama. Well, not everybody, but there are people that are tired of drama. There are people who don't want to be associated with the things. They don't trust the system. So, Ray, they're fed up with it. And they're like, it doesn't matter. My vote doesn't matter anyway. So I'm just going to not vote.
Yeah, so it's sort of and I think you hit the nail on the head with several of those things. It's sort of this triangle of problems. You've got a lack of trust, which I think is probably connected to the negative politicians, or we can't trust these people. These people are only out for themselves, et cetera, but also a lack of understanding. If you don't understand the government, if you don't understand how things work, why they work the way they do, et cetera, then that lack of understanding can build a lack of trust. So I think all three of these things are deeply connected.
Yeah, and go back to let's break it down, because we always focus on the federal, but go down to a local level. And a lot of times what you'll see on the local level are extremely important issues. Excuse me. So here's one, talk about the economy. There are some local level issues where they want to vote to add a penny cent tax, right? They're going to add a penny to each of the goods that you buy, sales tax kind of a thing. It's 1 cent on every item that you buy. Well, right. And they say, okay, well, if you'll support this legislation, we'll use that penny sales tax, addition to fund schools, or to take care of social, emotional, mental, issues, or whatever it might be on a local level. But there are people who don't trust the government and are saying, you're taking enough taxes out of my paycheck. I'm having to pay $3.50 for gas. I'm paying, $10 for a Happy Meal. I'm not giving you another cent. Even though it might be used for the good of the county or of the town or of the city, people don't trust the government to handle their money. And so they say no, they refuse. And then you have some very strong issues. Like there's one in our area that is talking about a referendum on alcohol sales, and that is, once again, it could be about the economy. People are wanting to advocate that, say, for, money and other issues. But then you have some people who just say, well, no, I don't agree with that just because of my values, because of my, my beliefs. I don't think that's right. And so they would say, I support building the economy, but I don't support building the economy that way. So it's so important that during these midterm elections that people especially pay attention to their local issues and that they recognize that it matters, because it makes a huge difference as to how you move forward in your local community. And so I think that regardless of how you feel, apathetic or not, it is our responsibility as a citizen to be informed, not by social media, but to be informed by what the true meanings are, and to go out and to vote.
Yeah, and it just goes back to something we said earlier in this episode, where local elections, local politics can have a more influential impact on your day-to-day life. I mean, when you're having chest pains and you call 911, local politics is going to affect, and to some degree, how fast that ambulance can get to your house. When you send your child to the schoolhouse, local politics, local school board, et cetera, is going to determine a lot about the bus, the school, et cetera. But like you said, a lot of the attention goes to federal, because when you turn on the news, you get, the president, you get Congress, you may even get governor, but there's not a lot of talk about small town America, where local politics is basically everything. And you mentioned the 1 penny sales tax, and it's been on the ballot around here for as long as I can remember, to support schools, to support EMS, whatever the case may be. And I believe most of the time, unfortunately, it fails because, like you said, people look at the situation and go, well, I'm already being taxed to death and I'm not seeing much benefit from it. It's certainly understandable.
Yeah, and I think that's why it is important, once again, to take time and research and be informed, not just during a midterm election or a general election, but know what's going on in your community. And don't just trust what your neighbor says or trust even what a politician says, but attend those meetings, do your research, read the bill, look at what's going on, and be one that makes a decision that is based on reason, based on evidence, information. But I think that it is still important that whatever we do, we vote. It doesn't matter your party. It doesn't matter, if you are of the age to vote, you have the solemn duty to make America a great place by exercising your right to vote. Because, Ray, there's a lot of people in other countries who do not have the opportunity to have a role in politics and be able to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Be informed. I was talking to a lady the other day. She came to me asking about some local, she had one of those, looks like a newspaper, basically, about the different candidates running for this office, running for that office. Most of them were local. And, she was trying to figure out, well, what about this person? What about this person? And she was having a hard time getting information on some of these local candidates, but she was actually doing her homework. And I said, that's absolutely fantastic. She apologized for bothering me. I'm like, no, this is absolutely fantastic because you're doing your homework, which most people don't do. Most people don't take the time to scour Facebook looking for this candidate's website and find out what they stand for. Because, a lot of times, Chris, even with local politics, it's hard to figure out what somebody stands for because it's, especially in small town America, I hate to use this term, but it's the Bubba system. I'm what's his name, and I've run for this office for the past 50 years. And,
Yeah. Come Tuesday, I think we will have a really good understanding. And once again, I think it will be able to answer the question that you said, what is driving people to make the decisions that they have made? And Ray, you've given the hypothesis. It's the economy, stupid. So it will be interesting to see on Wednesday morning. Ray, you're pretty good. You were able to call it as it was, or who knows, it might be something else that we didn't see coming. But at the end of the day, I do hope that the numbers are a whole lot higher. for voting during this midterm than they have been in the past, and that people will make informed decisions and not just decisions that their friends or others want them to make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Chris, this has been an excellent episode. I think a little different from what we normally do, but I think it was worth taking the time. I do want to mention to our listeners, and of course, it's been posted that we have had to move our sort of home base from Sounder FM to Anchor FM. This is due to a change with Sounder FM policy, where they're going to be stopping hosting podcasts. So we've had to switch over from Sounder FM to Anchor FM. None of our catalog of episodes will be lost. We're still available on Anchor FM. We're going to continue to be available on Amazon Music, Spotify, and other places where you get your podcast. We hope to grow the list of places where we are available. But we do encourage you to share this podcast with your friends, your family. Contact us if you have any questions or comments. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, or you can just send us an old-fashioned email. Chris, it's hard to believe that email is now old-fashioned, but you can send us an old-fashioned email at historyyoushouldknow@gmail.com. That's history, the letter you should know @gmail.com. So until next time, I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.
We'll talk to you later.